These Lykke Flight knitting needles are currently everywhere. Some people go even as far as saying these are the best interchangeable knitting needles they've ever knitted with. But here's the thing. This set costs $170 for only 9 pairs of knitting needles. So, are they actually worth that kind of money? After more than 100 requests to review them, I am finally putting them to the test. Let's find out whether they deserve the hype or whether you should rather keep your money. Here is the skinny. So the tips are super sharp with a medium-sized taper. Then there is smooth stainless steel and coated wire cables with a swivel adapter, and even the smaller sizes down to 2 millimeters are super durable. So let's take a very close look at this set. As you can see, I bought the standard set and the mini set here with this beautiful purple color. And inside are 9 tips, and then here there is a compartment for all the accessories. Let's get them all out. So this pouch here is super sturdy, so I can't even bend it. It's sort of reinforced, and inside you have a little Velcro, and you can use this to prop the needles up. So as you can see, the standard set comes with 9 tips, and it starts at 3.25 millimeters or US size 3, and then goes up all the way to 6.5 millimeters or US size 10.5. In terms of accessories, you get, sorry for the crinkling, you get 4 cables, quite a lot. Then you get quite a lot of cable stoppers, and then you also get some accessories. So these here would be the cable keys and cable connectors, and then you also get one of these little rubber pads you can use to screw things tight. For the small sets, it's basically the same. This is the mini set. There's also a bulky set, and the mini set, it starts at 2 millimeters and goes all the way up to 3 millimeters. So it's 5 sizes only. And here you also have a compartment with the same accessory or similar accessories rather. So you get to decide whether you want to buy the mini set, a standard set, or bulky set, depending on which needle sizes you prefer. But let's take a look at the needle tips, the cables and everything, and how well they perform next. So these here are the 5-inch tips. So the tips themselves, they are 11.5 millimeters long. There's also a 3.5-inch version that is obviously 1.5 inches shorter. So I would say the larger your hands, the bigger the knitting needle needs to be. And of course, if you want to knit in one continuous round, then shorter tips might be better for you. These tips are pure stainless steel, and I would like to highlight that they are polished quite a bit. If you compare them with the ChiaoGoo tips, so here are 2 ChiaoGoo tips, then you might be able to notice, very difficult to capture on camera, that these are not as polished. So the ChiaoGoo tips, they have, for lack of a better word, a bit of a texture. And if you slide them against each other, they produce this kind of grinding noise, whereas here these Lykke Flight knitting needles are polished quite a bit more. And the noise they emit is quite a bit lighter, quite a bit less noticeable. All the needle tips are hollow inside, so they are quite lightweighted. If you compare it with Knit Pro or CHAGU, it's round about the same weight. The only knitting needles that are decidedly lighter would be the higher knitting needles, but those are really light, and I really like how durable they are. So these here would be the 2mm Lykke Flight knitting needles. And look, I barely can bend them. And actually, I've been knitting with these knitting needles, these exact knitting needles, for quite a while, maybe 30 hours, while preparing for this video. And see, they are still not even remotely crooked, still perfectly parallel. So the durability really speaks for these needles. Another thing that also speaks for the Lykke Flight knitting needles are the super sharp tips. So they are very sharp, and if you are someone who pushes the tips a lot, well, you might actually get hurt. The taper here has a very nice length, not too short, not too long, so perfect for standard stitches and when you want to go fast. So let's compare these Lykke Flight tips with the other 3 major players on the market for stainless steel knitting needles. So here, those are the Lykke Flight knitting needles. Here, these are the Knit Pro Mindful. This would be CHAGU, and here we have higher. And you can see they look pretty similar, but there are tiny little details. So if I would have to rank them in terms of sharpness, then higher would be on the first spot, followed by the Lykke knitting needles, then Knit Pro Mindful, and the CHAGU knitting needles actually on the last spot. When it comes to the length of the taper, then Knit Pro Mindful wins the race. Higher and CHAGU are more or less on the same level. Well, CHAGU is a tiny fraction longer, and then the Lykke knitting needles actually have the shortest taper. So these Lykke Flight knitting needles have a very short taper. This means as I knit a stitch, I always need to slide this stitch past the taper before I can drop it. So the longer the taper is, the farther I need to slide it, and this of course takes time. On the other hand, if I am knitting complicated stitches, like knit 2 together through the back loop, the longer the taper, the more stitches you can accommodate here at the very tip of your knitting needles without stretching them out. So if I were to knit 3 together through the back loop, this stitch here wouldn't fit on the taper anymore. So as I knit it, I'm more likely to stretch out these stitches, and this could potentially lead to a sloppy stitch definition. But all in all, these Lykke Flight tips are super sharp. So as long as you are knitting with a super slitty yarn or a pattern that has a lot of super complicated stitches, these are a joy to knit with. Another thing I want to highlight is how well these needles are manufactured. So these are the 5mm knitting needles, and as you can see, almost spot on. Of course, I also want to take a very close look at the other end of these needles. And then, as you can see, this transition here towards the join is very slow and not steep at all. If you compare this to higher or CHAGU, where this transition is a lot steeper, here you have a luxuriously long slope. If we focus here on the immediate join where you screw things tight, then I can also say that this bit here is very well manufactured. I mean, if I glide across it here with my fingernail, it slightly catches, but it's a very small step. So here, I hope you can see it a little bit better from this angle. So it might not be perfection, but it's very Good. This transition here towards the cable is also very, very well done. You have to know that these cables, those are swivel cables. So as you can see, I can freely rotate these tips around without moving the cable. And here, this transition is also very, very or remarkably smooth. Of course, there's a little step. Of course, it needs some freedom to move around, but it's remarkably well done. So can you see how smooth this here is? Nothing catches. And here also, if I glide it across this bit here, very smooth, very lovely transition. Here towards the end, of course, it catches the yarn. That's the nature of all swivel cables, but I wouldn't say in a horrible way, more like in an expectable way. And to use a real project here, so can you see it's actually very easy to slide new stitches here to this knitting needle, and mind you, this is a very delicate cashmere yarn that might easily get caught, but you know, it works well enough. Here at some point I can notice a little bit of a resistance, but otherwise slides in and out quite lovely. Now let's talk cables, and here I have excellent news for you because each standard set comes with 4 different cable sizes. Length. One is, as you can see, super short, and then you also get one really long cable that is, I believe, 47 inches or 120 centimeters long. So no matter if you want to knit a cowl in one continuous round or knit a blanket or a big lace shawl, you are covered. And what's even better, here, these are the 6.5 millimeter knitting needles, and you can use the exact same cable to attach the smallest size in the set 3, that would be 3.25 millimeter knitting needles. So it's one cable size for all these needles, and some other brands don't do this, and they have you using 2 different cable sizes, and I feel this kind of defeats the whole purpose of an interchangeable knitting needle set. So this is the Lykke Flight cable, and this is the CHAOGOO red twist cable, and at first glance they look almost the same. So I have these 2 cables here, and they are more or less exactly the same. Now if I curl up the CHAOGOO cable like so, and then let go, can you see? This would be the result. Now let's curl up the Lykke Flight cable here, and I'm gonna release it. Can you see the difference? It will be a lot more dramatic here with these larger cables, but I would say from my experience the Lykke Flight cables are less flexible than the CHAOGOO cables. They are a little bit more prone to kinking. So this is a cable I haven't even used once yet, and already I can see some kinks. The CHAOGOO cable also has a kink, but this is, I don't know, a decade old or so. And it's also a little bit more curly, so it's less flexible. So I would say, if I just look at the cable itself, CHAOGOO wins the race. This is still a nice cable, but not as nice. However, of course, this is a swivel cable, and whenever you are knitting with such stiff cables, a swivel cable really helps. So I could well imagine if you like to knit socks or sleeves 2 at a time, these Lykke Flight cables, these rather rigid flight cables, might be a good choice. But if you just talk about cables, I would say you are better off with the Chagu cables. Now, in this context, there is one important note. So this here is the mini set. So size is 2 millimeters up to 3 millimeters. And those are not interchangeable with the standard cables. So here these are 2 millimeter knitting needles, and this won't get me anywhere. I mean, it's kind of understandable because the cable itself is almost bigger and thicker than the needle. So you need a separate cables, mini cables, and then you can screw them to the needles just as well. These cables are a lot thinner, a lot more flexible, and the coating is actually a lot thinner as well. So I actually like these cables a lot, and these aren't, and this is important, these aren't swivel cables. So this is very, very important. These cables here are fixed. I personally actually like them more. The standard cables only are the swivel cables. That is, I can totally understand why they made the decision, and I'm not even sure you can produce swivel cables that are so fine, but yeah, it makes the product a little bit more confusing. And as a European knitter, I have to say, so the standard set stops at 3.25 millimeters, and then you need to switch to the mini set. And as a European knitter, I wish those 3 millimeter needles would be part of the standard set, because 3 millimeters is such a standard knitting needle size, and I am not sure if it sits all that well with me that I really need to buy another expensive set with a different cable size that works differently on top of that to access this very common size. So yeah, I mean, I understand why they did it and why it's necessary. I wish 3 millimeters was part of the standard set. Aside from the cables, I also want to take a quick look at the other accessories that come with these sets. Now, first of all, this compartment here, the fabric is very, very sturdy, but I feel you will be hard pressed to fit any more notions into this little compartment. So I wish the pouches would be a little bit roomier. So what do you get? So you get a nice little rubber patch. Why a rubber patch needs to be in a plastic bag, this is beyond me. And then you get these 8 cable stoppers, but why they need to be wrapped up separately is entirely beyond me as well. So it's plastic in plastic bags, and more plastic bags for good measure. Now these cable stoppers, you can use them to put a project on hold. Very nice. I will say, I don't think they make too much sense, because here, this socket, it's pure plastic, so it wears out very fast. It's also sometimes very difficult to actually screw things on. I mean, this little handle here is kind of nice, but other than that, I've seen better. Now there's yet another little plastic bag, because they all need to be packed separately, of course. And here you have 4 cable keys. You can use these to really screw things tight. And here I definitely will say other brands take note. Lykke adds 4 of these keys, so if one gets lost, it won't matter. So many brands just add 2, and I feel that's just almost criminal. And then you get these cable connectors here, and you can use these to create a very, very long cable, and that's really nice, and it really works well because these are swivel cables. If you are working with non-swivel cables, attaching this connector is actually very difficult, so that works really well. However, if I take my ruler here, this metal bit ends up being 7 centimeters, so well, 3 inches roughly, and that's just so long and cumbersome, and I just wish they would have made it at least a little bit shorter. This is just, I don't know, it's almost to the point where you won't be able to use it. I can't imagine knitting a big lace shawl or like a big doily or something like tablecloth with that in the middle. So yeah, that's not so nice, I would say. If we take a look at the smaller sets, they also come with more or less the same accessories. So this is the mini set. So you also get one of these patches. You get cable stoppers here, 4 of them, again in separate plastic pouches for whatever reason. And you get connectors and cable keys. In this case, it's just 2 keys and of course cable. So it's the exact same thing, of course, in this case in a different size to accommodate the smaller knitting needles. So I will say, setting the extensive use of plastic bags aside, what I really like about these sets is you get what you need, but there are no further cheap trinkets included, like scissors, stitch markers or so. You don't never end up using because you prefer your own scissors or stitch markers. So that's nice. So it's the basics, it's everything you need, but not more. Now you might be wondering about the knitting qualities, and all I can say here is they are a true joy to knit with. So in preparation for this video, I've been working on this double knitting project in a lovely cashmere yarn, and for this kind of project the tips and the taper are downright ideal. So a longer taper might actually hinder me a little bit, but I prefer sharp tips, and the metal is has just the right kind of smoothness. So yeah, it's really lovely to knit with them. They aren't very noisy either, which might sort of annoy me as well. So very lovely. So we are back here in my studio for some last words. Do I think that Lykke Flight Interchangeable knitting needles are an awesome product? Yes, I knitted 2 projects with them, and I have to say I thoroughly enjoyed knitting with them. These needles are nice and smooth, at least by stainless steel standards, and rather noiseless. The short taper of these Lykke Flight needles make them a little bit more pleasant to knit when your pattern is mostly simple stitches, and the swivel connections work like a charm. To be sure, the cables themselves leave room for improvement. Right now, the standard size is a little bit too stiff and too curly for my personal tastes, but I actually enjoyed working with these mini cables a lot. So, if money is no consideration, these could be a lovely and versatile set for an advanced beginner. Money, however, is a good cue, because the CHAGU sets or the Knit Pro Mindful sets, also stainless steel, similar tips, similar cables, typically come with 12 or 13 tips instead of just 9. So if you want to cover the same kind of size range, you'd have to buy both the standard and the mini set or the bulky set. And then the price quickly becomes ridiculous, because that will set you back by almost $300 US. On top of that, I did mention that I really like the fact that if you buy the standard set, you don't have to deal with 2 different cable sizes, compared to CHAGU, where you always have these small and large cables and so on. But if you need to buy both sets to cover the same size range, you end up with 2 cable sizes regardless. So I don't know. I'm also not the biggest fan of these pouches. They are kind of stiff, they are kind of bulky. Plus, this compartment, because it's so stiff, you will have a big problem fitting more accessories and notions into that bit. And I don't quite understand this Velcro thing. It just adds another bulky layer to the pouch for, I don't know, what's even the use case? If you can't access your knitting needles, if they're like that, you probably can't access this Velcro either. So I don't know, maybe some of you could enlighten me. Why on earth would they add this Velcro thing? Are you using your set like that? Because I typically don't. So, what I'm trying to say here is, if you already own a set of stainless steel needles and you are mostly satisfied with them, I don't think there are a lot of reasons to justify the expense. At the end of the day, the Lykke Flight needles literally bring nothing new to the market. It's basically just catching up with their competitors. That being said, Lykke has tons of different products and needles on the market, and these are all interchangeable with this set. They are even interchangeable with all Knit Pro products. So you could take the Lykke Flight needles and combine them with the Lykke driftwood cables, or use the Lykke Flight cables and connect them to the Lykke Cupra needles. You could pick the Knit Pro Nova or the Knit Pro Carbons needles and combine them with these accessories, the cables or the tips. And that is definitely noteworthy, because CHAGU and especially Haya, they don't offer you this kind of versatility yet. Now, if the consideration is between Knit Pro Mindful and Lykke Flight, then you really would have to focus on the taper. One has a very long taper, the other a very short taper, but the rest is almost identical. I think they are even produced in the very same factory in India, and so it almost feels like the difference is between the shape, color and material of the pouch. I mean, that's a valid difference, but probably not the difference most knitters are after. But all in all, it is a really solid product that I feel works really well. Unlike many other products on the market, I don't think there is a single major flaw that really sticks out in a bad way, other than perhaps the price. Anyway, would you buy these Lykke Flight knitting needles? Or maybe not. Comment below, and as always, happy knitting and enjoy the rest of your day.